I'm sure you saw the news about the Cybertruck bomber,
Yeah,
and that he served in Ukraine.
I saw that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what are your
It-
thoughts about some things like this? I mean,
yeah.
and we also had the attempted assassination on Trump was also somebody that was very, very pro-Ukraine,
Right.
anti-Russia.
Right.
Um, to me, it seems like it's kind of proof that there's more involvement from the U.S. armed forces in Ukraine, and they are feeling that desperation. And I was just kind of thinking, I'm trying to understand from their point of view, and I realize that if you're over there with the Ukrainians and you're fighting the Russians and you've lost 600,000 people have died, maybe more, who knows, you've seen all this bloodshed, you feel like it can't be for nothing. It's just such a heartbreaking thing, as you have to believe that you're in the right, that you're fighting for
Uh-huh.
the right cause, and it just can push people to do crazy things. It's a sad state of affairs that I just wonder how. I think it's just. Do you think it's just these people trying to cope with what's happening in Russia, and then it leads them to try to do some terrorist attack? What are your thoughts on
Well,
this?
I think your explanation makes sense. Again, when you're talking about these individuals, they're generally unbalanced. So it's not entirely rational, but I don't think an assassination attempt is ever rational. It's emotion driven, and I think, yeah, what you um, your explanation holds water. I mean, I think also in general, like the other one, the one that I attempted the assassination in Florida, I don't think he had ever been to Ukraine. Maybe I'm not remembering that correctly. I don't think he certainly wasn't involved in the
He
fighting.
was
Oh,
he
he
wasn't
was.
fighting, but he was doing like, yeah, kind of
He wasn't involved in the
promo
fighting.
videos, kind of
Okay,
recruiting
right.
and
That sounds right.
PR
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
right.
Uh,
But there is so much demonization of Russia and idealization of Ukraine. It's just that for a lot of people, it really does become just this battle between good and evil. It's just black and white, and how can we have to stand by these people? How can we have and they hear again. I don't really think policies are going to change in a significant way, but if you listen to the media, you have the sense that that it's almost a certainty that Trump is going to impose some sort of unfair, unjust solution on Ukraine, or he's just going to, pull the plug on the effort, and the poor Ukrainians who have fought so bravely are going to be overrun by these evil hordes. And yeah, I think that's really what exists in their mind, and it explains the the extreme actions that they take.
right. I just feel like this war, it's different than comparing it to things like, World War II when the Germans surrendered or the Japanese surrendered. I just don't see this really ending, especially if we are seeing kind of a trend for Ukraine to move more towards terrorism. Like if they stop at the Dnieper, for example, I just feel like there'll be so much animosity in Western Ukraine. I mean, everybody in Western Ukraine knows, probably they personally probably know somebody that died in this conflict, or
Hmm.
or has fled or has been wounded. There's just going to be so much anger and angst, and to think that all this was for nothing. Not more
Uh-huh.
than nothing. Like we could have had all of Ukraine if we just agreed to the deal, before. And
Yeah.
this,
Well, yeah, that's the way they should think. I mean, that's because that's true. Actually, it would be best if the Minsk Accords were put into effect. They wouldn't have even lost the Donbass. They would have had all of Ukraine. And so it's just with every deal that was torn up or rejected, and there's the current offer of the four oblasts. That too is being rejected. Yeah, their situation gets worse and worse. And the rational thing is to look, we took a wrong turn. We got to make a correction now. Okay, we lost all that. We're going to lose even more. Let's accept the deal. But they can't do that. It's like you said. It's just that when you've sacrificed so much for something, you just can't tell yourself that you were wrong. It's hard to admit that those 600,000, or who knows really how many died,
Right. That your
died
son, your
entirely
brother, your
for nothing.
husband.
They died
Yeah.
in vain. It was for nothing. It was stupid. They died for a stupid government, and it's really hard to come to terms with that. So you need to believe in it. And then, so the government takes advantage of that and says, we've got to keep on fighting. We will turn this around. And so you just want to believe that. And obviously fewer and fewer people within Ukraine are believing it. That's what the polls show. But there still is a core, and it's still these ultra nationalists who are, they're committed to a fight to the death. For them, it's like death is preferable to surrender, and those are the people that unfortunately run the country. I think the average Ukrainian doesn't think that way and really would like to see this come to an end, but they don't have any say in the matter. It's the ultra nationalists that are setting the policy and will continue to do so in the foreseeable future.
Yeah. I also saw something about recently that they're going to be lowering the conscription age to 18. Do you know if that's been confirmed?
Yeah, I've heard rumors about that, let's say, over the last few weeks, and they seem to be intensifying. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. And I think the Ukrainians know that that's probably what's going to happen, which is why a lot of 16 and 17-year-old boys have been leaving the country over the last few months.
I mean, this has to be a pretty unpopular decision, right? Do you think
Yeah.
this could?
Well, that's why Zelensky obviously was so reluctant to do it. But I think he's been pressured by the West for months now, and I think he probably has already relented, and we're going to see that conscription of 18-year-olds begin soon.
Do you think that could cause some, rumblings of revolution? I just wonder how much more the Ukrainian people can take. I mean,
Yeah.
I really feel bad for them.
I do too. It's really awful. It's a terrible situation. It really is.
Right. I mean, just a whole generation of Ukrainians have died, and I think a lot of people kind of want to. And the problem with war is people will get into this just mindset of cheering when you inflict damage on the other side, and you forget kind of just the human loss. And a lot of these people, they're just they maybe they've been indoctrinated to a certain extent, but I mean, who knows? I mean, especially if you're if you're a kid, 17, 18 years old, you don't know better. It's easy to get indoctrinated. I would have probably been too.
Right,
it's just
every 17 and 18-year-old is essentially doesn't really have his own thoughts. I mean, let's be honest. Or it's very, very rare. It's just that you believe what you're told.
Right. Yeah, it's such a tragedy. I hope it comes to an end soon. But like you said, it just seems like we just keep on. I feel like we really will push them to the last Ukrainian. We'll fight to the last one. Don't you think that this has to end soon? I mean, it can't. You're getting down to scraping the bottom of the barrel. I've also been seeing reports of more mass desertions on the front. I just don't see how it can keep going.
Yeah.
How can they keep doing this? It's so
right.
evil.
It's amazing that actually it's gone on as long as it has, and there has been it seems like a steady deterioration in morale and an increase in desertions, and that eventually that will become completely unsustainable. It's hard to say when. You even have some Ukrainians say that maybe we have 6 more months, and then we've been using the word collapse, but I think we're still not at the collapse. There is a crumbling, there is an acceleration in the Russian advances. There's an obvious weakening and also lowering of morale on the Ukrainian side. But they're still fighting. Especially in certain places like Kursk, Seversk, even in the southern Donbass, they're not putting up much of a defense, but they're still putting up a defense. The Russians still have to proceed. They proceed steadily. They take like a village or two every day, at least. But they have to proceed cautiously. There's still those drones, not as many as there used to be. And, they come to find ways of defending against them, but you still have to be careful. But if, eventually, I think there really will be a collapse, and we're probably going to see it in a true collapse, where it's just like, okay, there's just nothing there. The resistance is gone. They just turn, and it's not just like a couple hundred men from this battalion or this brigade, or a couple hundred from that other one that desert, but entire brigades just turn and flee. And then we have a true collapse, and then the Russians will be able to just march unimpeded. We're not there yet, but we may see it. I mean, because that's the course that we're on. It's just a steady, if you look at a graph, you see Ukraine is just steadily weakening and Russia is growing in strength. And there's some point where that gap becomes so big that there just isn't really even a war anymore. There still is a war. Obviously, they can still fight, and the Russians have to be cautious, and they are. That's the thing is, I think a lot of people, including some kind of generally pro-Russian military analysts, are frustrated with the Russians. They say, if they took more risks, they probably could bring this war to an end sooner. But Putin he's risk averse. And he's actually, I think it's clear, in spite of everything you hear in the West, that he's actually very concerned with conserving Russian lives. And, and I'm sure the parents of all these young men who are out there are very grateful for that. So it's not until where there's, as long as they can kill Russian soldiers in significant numbers, the Russians are going to proceed cautiously, even if it's steady. It's actually, we're talking about 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers a day. It's not going to be, a rapid movement across the steppe until that resistance just completely caves in. And I think we may see that this year. I think we probably will.
When we hear about these desertions, where are they deserting to? Is it a desertion, or are they defecting, or are they surrendering? I mean, what?
Some are surrendering, clearly, and I think that's gone up, but not that many. I'm surprised, and it may be the effects of it. Just may be very difficult and dangerous to surrender, when you're on the front line, and there is a chance. I know it happens. I've seen the videos that sometimes men that surrender on the Ukrainian side actually get shot by their fellow soldiers or by some unit that's behind them. That happens. So for whatever reason, or maybe it's just propaganda, a lot of them have been brainwashed, convinced that the Russians are going to torture them or something. There haven't been that many surrenders. There certainly, I think it's clearly on the increase, but the desertions are very common. There was recently a story that appeared, I think it was maybe the BBC, it was a major Western media outlet. It was supposed to be an elite brigade, I think the 155th, that trained in France, and they got the best equipment, Leopard 2 tanks, and and this was supposed to be an elite group. 1,500 of them deserted before they even got to the front lines. And then the whole thing, it just became a joke because, okay, we don't have hardly any of the men that we're supposed to have. We'll just grab this guy who got out, we grabbed him on the street a week ago, and we'll just put him in there. And it ended up being a total disaster. They didn't accomplish anything immediately. A lot of them, when they did get to the front lines, immediately turned and fled or, hardly put up a fight.
Right. So that's my question, though. What if they deserted? You have a group of 1,500 armed men that are doing what? That are where?
Well, some of them I'm sure have crossed the border. Some of them are hiding in basements. Some of them.
When you say cross the border into where?
Romania. That's Hungary. I think those are usually their destinations.
Okay, so they're just flooding into Western Europe.
Yeah, I don't know if it's fair to say flooding, but they're the ones that can get there. It's difficult. The borders are guarded, but they do it. They especially this time of year. There are mountains and rivers to cross, and it's a dangerous trek. Yeah, and some of them, quite a few, have died in the process. Of attempting to escape this country.
But I mean, if you're closer to the front, I mean, there's no way you're making it all the way over Romania or Moldova.
I don't know.
So
That,
it's
actually,
just,
that's crossed my mind too. It's something that we need to look into. Where do they just go back home? But then you would think that the
they would get
Ukrainians
mounted up,
would
arrested, shot.
Yeah. Well, I haven't. Some of them do get shot. Some of them do get killed or beaten to death. A lot of them are thrown into prison, or maybe they're just sent back to the front. I don't know. It's actually a good question.
Right. Yeah. Because I've been hearing about those desertions. I'm like, well, they can't just kind of go back home and start playing Xbox or something. They have to.
You wouldn't think so. Yeah.
Right. So I was thinking that maybe they're going over to the other side, maybe not fully defecting, but going over on the Russian side, and then they'd be able to give a lot of intel to the Russians as well, and it would further expedite just the end of the war. I guess we were just speculating now, so we don't have to further.
Well,
but
there's something to keep our eyes open for, see if we can find out more what's happening to where these people are going.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we can wrap it up here, unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
No, I think this is a good place to end.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Dad. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.